Hey there, everybody. Welcome to HR Tech Talks. I am Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad to have you here with us today. As always, if you're watching this live, you're watching this on the recording later, it does not matter to me. I'm just so glad you're here. Please take a second, pop your name in the chat, or we know your name. Pop your location in the chat so we know where you're connecting in from. It's always fun for me to see where everybody is and where you're listening in from. And we often, actually, I'll tell you a secret. We actually sometimes pick prizes out for those people and send some things out like that. I actually got a book and a summer school shirt to send out later today to someone that chimed in last week on an event. So love doing that. Hey, you might have noticed the background is a little bit different today. Just moved into a brand new office and so excited about this. Also, first Tech Talks episode in this new office. And so haven't got the bookshelf stocked up and haven't got the backdrop and everything set up. And there's lots of other things to figure out, but so glad to be here and looking forward to this conversation today and glad to have you here. So today we have Ike Binion and Henry Vasquez from Cornerstone. We're going to talk about skills. We're going to talk about AI, all those kind of fun things. We were actually chatting in the pre-show, getting ready in the green room back there. And one of them asked about the book that I wrote on AI for HR. And I was telling them, I don't think I've mentioned this publicly yet, but the next edition of the book is coming out in January. And so lots of updates and changes and what's new and what's different and what's exactly the same as it was a couple of years ago when the first edition came out. So that's actually out for pre-order right now. If you want to check it out, it's on Amazon. Artificial intelligence for HR. It's pretty straightforward on the topic. And I'm so excited to see that next version come out because a lot of the things, again, have shifted and changed and the tools are so much smarter than I thought they would be. And we'll talk about some of that today in the discussion as we look at skills as the data source and how those things factor into all the things we're doing as employers. So without any further ado, I'm going to welcome both of the guys on. And they actually told me it's the Ike and Henry show is how they're named. So you're welcome to give them a shout out there on LinkedIn, on YouTube, wherever you're watching the Ike and Henry show. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thank you.
Ike, I would love for you to go first. Just let us know a little about who you are and what you do, and then we'll pass that ball over to Henry before we dive in, if you don't mind.
So first of all, most importantly, thanks for having us, but also your tweed jacket to match your bookshelf is in the mail. So leather patches and everything, you're set to go. I've got you. So my name is Ike Binion. I'm the Director of Product Marketing, Innovation, and Strategy. And as part of that, I used to manage directly the learning portfolio, so both Saba and Cornerstone products, and have had a variety of stops along the HCM pathway through my career. And turning it over to Henry.
Thanks, Ike. My name is Henry Vasquez. I'm a manager of product management here at Cornerstone, and I'm responsible for the Skills and Capabilities Initiative, which is basically a new platform built on AI that extends across all of Cornerstone.
Tremendous. Awesome. And Henry, I don't want to spoil your fun here, but congratulations on your upcoming anniversary. I know that's you've got some fun stuff planned, but hey, I just want to give you a shout out because that's awesome. That's an accomplishment, and here's to many more years for you and your beautiful bride. So, hey to Liz and Michelle and Rahul and a couple of others that are already chiming in here on the live stream. Glad to have all of y'all here with us for the conversation. Looking forward to you chiming in, sharing some questions, sharing some ideas, things like that as we go. So let's dive in. I've set this up enough, I think. I've talked about AI and skills and everything else. And I'd love for one of you to kick this off. We talk about, I write a lot about skills. I write a lot about them in the book, obviously, but also just kind of day to day, seeing how skills are changing in the conversation right now around hiring. Like we need these skills, we can't find these skills. It's just, it's always kind of the core piece of conversations, it feels like. And I'd love to hear from one of you about how and why skills are becoming this kind of common foundation for success as a principle in the business or as a key piece of the business. Feels like we've finally shifted and said, okay, now these matter. And I'd love to hear kind of why and how.
That's a great question. And I think you bring up all of the right factors that are driving this conversation out in the market. It's sort of, in my perspective, a perfect storm that we have a more fluid and changing world of work. Even before the last 2 years, gigs were strongly on the rise, and so was contract work. And then at the same time, yes, we had this global pandemic that was a common experience we all had. We started to have to reevaluate how we thought about work, how we thought about personal life, how we connected all of those things together. But then I think that there was something also happening in all of this on the admin side, on the organizational side, that today's organizations are overrun with talent complexity and technology silos that make it challenging for everyone to try and meet the objectives that they're driving towards. That so many things pinpoint a specific problem, and getting them to all work together and talk together is easier said than done. But to truly be successful in this long term, organizations need to think about a holistic system of work that works for everyone, that must unite businesses, people on a shared path of success. And skills plays a really critical part in all of that, because first, the way that our market is shaping, it's a unifying language. That's a really strong and important thing, especially as another thing that's been happening in that fluidity of work piece is that titles just don't match what you're doing anymore. I know that we have all seen a job description where we get on the other side and we're like, wait, what? And it's not even a fact of the manager or the organization. It's just the fact that that's the way that the world is going. And so we can't look just at title anymore and making matches for talent. And so skills is helpful to both employee and organization because they can tag everything. We can put a skill on almost anything to help match up the right things to the right people and give the right insight. And the second is it extends across the entire career life cycle, from recruiting all the way to your third or fourth promotion, succession, whatever. There's skills involved as part of an input as well as an output. And then finally, it helps to elevate participants in the process, because I, as a manager, can have a really meaningful and granular conversation with direct reports on their skills, but then immediately bring in the right people who I know have those same skills, regardless of their own titles, and bring everyone along in the process of development, which was difficult before. And so this is becoming that universal language for growth and success for sure.
You used a phrase there. You said skills as input and output. And I think I have a picture of what that means, but would you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think when we're thinking about, let's say, a performance conversation, the way that we're thinking about it is I, as a manager, should be able to pull out a little drawer and see everything that this person is that I'm talking to in terms of their skills and what they're wanting to focus on and learn about. And then as an output, now I can see not only where they should go, so take direct action as an output of that insight of skills, but then that action also is tagged with skills. So right along in that same drawer, I should also have the ability to see content and people and all sorts of resources that will help that person progress in that specific skill area. But then there's also the reporting aspect, which is, more traditionally when we say output, what that means. But yeah, over time, we've got observation of that skill and use from peers, managers, self, that we can see direction and progress over time as an outcome directly of that skills conversation.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like the big picture, I've seen this shift happening over time where we increasingly get more granular and say it's less about, again, this job title, which we actually might only want this little segment of what that entire job spans. Can you talk about that a little bit? Kind of the transition away from like a job focused to skills or work, like more task oriented, because I feel like that gives us a chance to be, again, take today's landscape as an example. Instead of saying we've got to have this person that does all these things because we need that little slice, it's no, this is the skill that I need. We actually have that over here. We don't call it that, or we need to find that. So would you talk about that kind of transition a little bit?
Yeah, I can take this one. If you really look back at how we got here, you go all the way back to World War I and the standardization and professionalization of HR. And you really have like this idea that we need to write down roles and we need to give that a name and we need to train people against that thing. And this goes so far back, pre-technology and pre-software, really. And
pre-HR,
pre-HR, pre-professionalization of HR, exactly. And it starts with the military and the government, and they're like, okay, the job is the unit of analysis. And we're living under that regime still today, 80 plus years later. And so what happened is at some point, we realized that inside of a job is really a set of capabilities. It's things that people can do. You can kind of break that molecule down, and now you've got a set of capabilities. And inside of capabilities are things like skills and domain knowledge and these other kinds of behaviors and dispositions. We're now at the place in terms of technological maturity that we can talk about skills in a granular fashion. We have an efficient way to gather that data. We have a maturity in the industry to get used to talking about that data and capturing it. And we've been doing that for, a decade or so, but it's only because of AI and these other things that we can be that fluid. So there's the tech change, but then there's also the culture change. What about the fact that jobs are changing faster? What about gig economy? What about contractors, offshoring, outsourcing? All of these things start leading you towards, oh, wait, we actually just need we need work done. We need some kind of task done. We need some kind of project. And so it's never just technology. It's also the culture. In a lot of ways right now, the technology is ahead of the culture. The culture is what needs to kind of morph and adapt to eventually take advantage of what we have in our hands.
One of the things I was thinking of is I was listening to a podcast as I'm lugging boxes and moving and shifting over here. There was a podcast to listen to, and they were talking with this gentleman who was a trainer of Navy SEALs. And he said, it's really easy for me to say you need skill A, B, or C to do this job, but it's much harder to get down and really define, like, hey, Ike is great at B and C, but he's not really great at A. And Henry is great at A and C, but not very much at B. And right, and Ben's got his own things that he can do any of those, right? And being able to pinpoint those is really difficult for a human. And you talked about AI there a second ago. You kind of slipped that one in, which warms my heart a little bit to hear that. Talk about how that fits into this picture, because we're talking about skills as a thing over here, and it's easy for those that may not spend as much time as we do, right, in and around the AI machine learning conversation, to see the connection there. I'm kind of picturing that pretty clearly, but I'd love for you to talk about how that fits into this, because I feel like that's the opportunity that's in front of most organizations right now, especially enterprise companies, and they may not even realize it.
Yeah, great question. When I think about skills and AI, it's, if you just have skills without AI, it's a little bit like Sisyphus and the boulder sort of thing, rolling up the hill. You have the admin, you have the company. Hey guys, let's form a committee. Let's come up with critical skills. It's going to take millions of dollars. Let's go hire this consulting firm. And it's very political. It's going to take a lot of time. And then when we finally get it right, it's all irrelevant again. That is the story of skills without AI. It's something that's just hard to do. It's hard to scale. It's hard to know what's going on the ground across your people. It's hard to capture data. It's just a losing battle. We've seen that for so long. We talk about the history of HR. That's really up to this point. On the other side, you could say, well, what about AI without skills? And that's just undirected. It's unfocused. It's just like statistical inference, but skills gives it this language. It gives it a semantics that we can use. Like every HR person, every employee is capable of talking about skills. It's really like a language and a culture more than anything. And so when you mix them, that's where you get this really cool kind of power, which is, it sort of says to people, we can deconstruct and kind of use these Lego blocks to talk about work, to talk about challenges, to talk about why things are and aren't working. There was a great conversation about the whole George Floyd protests and what needs to happen in police departments in terms of training, and having the language of skills and capabilities takes that to another level, because we can now deconstruct what's going on. What are people learning? Is it hard skills, or is it things like relationships and these other kinds of motions that need to happen to make sure people are doing the job right? And that's that kind of literacy in our culture of talking about skills and training is partly because AI is making it possible. It's making that lift and the burden a little bit easier. And so I'm excited of where it's going.
When I think about, if someone is listening to this right now, stop and take a second and think about the 3 or 4 skills, right, that you have, that you use in your job every day, whether they're strengths or not, just the things you use. Now think about your boss and the 3 or 4 skills they need. And then think about 3 of your coworkers. And you start to realize how hard it would be for anyone, even if you had, right, as Henry said, like the land of unlimited budgets to have admins and resources and people to try to manage this stuff. It still but quickly spirals out of control because we don't have the ability to tap into that information with any meaningful effectiveness. And so AI allows us to see all those skills, and not to see them, but how they relate to each other, where those gaps might exist, all those kinds of fun things. And that's what's really exciting about it, because as much time and effort and energy as we want to put towards this, there's a finite limit to how much we as humans can do. And one of the things I want to come back to, if you don't mind, is I know at least you, Henry, I don't remember if Ike mentioned it too, but I heard the word culture a couple times in this, about how this isn't just about a technology change or an adoption of a tool or flip the switch, but it's a culture kind of mindset kind of change. Would you talk about that piece of this a little bit, because I feel like that's, again, I love this stuff. I write about it. I've got a book on it. Like you won't find a bigger proponent for AI and those kind of tools. But at the same time, it sometimes feels like that's the pitch that employers get, is you just turn this on and it'll learn all your stuff and do all the things. And you and I know it's harder than that. It takes a little time to train a model. It takes time to get the right data in. Once it's there, it can do things you probably never expected. But talk about the culture and the mindset piece of that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I can touch on this a bit. I think when we look at the companies who are using skills with Cornerstone, it's almost never a technology challenge, or in many cases, not even a resource challenge. Like, we don't have the right HR team to do this, because like I said, it's now easier to do more with less because of technology. A lot of times it's cultural resistance. What do we mean by that? And what does a culture, a pro skills culture or skills forward culture look like? Really what it is it's one part of it is giving managers and employees the keys to success. It's taking skills from the back where no one knew what was going on. It's in hiding in reviews and succession data, and it's guarded by HR, to democratizing. Anyone can search for a skill, learn about it, learn about the behaviors, learn about the proficiencies, learn, like you said, which skills relate to each other. What happens when you give that to a manager and you empower them? What happens when you give it to an employee? And they can look at another person and their job title and go, I don't know what this person does, but now my company is going to help me understand it, and I can access that information. And I can go to my manager and say, this is the thing I need to learn, or this is the thing we lack on our team. Just think about that as a phase shift, very different from, the inside baseball of we're all in HR, we're talking about this stuff, but out in the field, they're using a different language. When people in the business doing the work have that kind of culture and that literacy to comfortably talk about skills, proficiency, how they relate, how they're important for jobs, it's transformative, and it really can scale the impact of what you can do.
And I think to that point, Henry, too, I think for HR practitioners listening, when you think about those resistances, that it's the perception of scarcity amongst managers. That's been the problem for a long time, right? Is that managers don't want to work on people to progress them into other areas, because then they have to go out and they get a punishment of needing to go find more talent. But if you think about it more in the sense that perception of scarcity is largely because of frictions in the process, where I don't see people who can help me with a project on my team that have a unique skill set that I don't need to hire a permanent position for. Likewise, as someone on my team has a unique skill set that can go help somewhere else, making the frictions smaller. And so that managers see both a give and a take from a broader talent pool within the organization helps, I think, immensely as well to move the conversation about what skills are internally and how to use them.
One of the other facets of this that it can feel very concrete, talking about specific skills and everything else. But one of the other things that fits into this is, you kind of alluded to it, both of you, is that this is also a chance for me to chart this path forward. Because if I can't chart a path inside the organization, when the recruiter across the street calls me for that job offer, I'll chart a path over there. I'll figure out what that looks like and visualize it. So talking about these things can also let you visualize and think about those aspirational skills too. Like, this is what I want to be. This is what I hope to be. And there was a fun stat that we picked up in a piece of research last year, that when people have a chance to kind of pinpoint and highlight and emphasize the specific things that interest them and the path they want to go on, they'll consume more learning content overall. So when we're talking about how do we get people to take the training, we got all these resources, all these tools over here that just use the tools, and sometimes that's its own problem itself. But that research showed us that when someone can talk about the things that matter to them, even if it doesn't fundamentally change the kinds of things they're presented with as options for training and learning, they'll still go more heavily into it because they feel like it's aligned with their interests. So part of this bigger conversation is the personalization piece and making it feel really tailored. And again, all the things we can't do as humans as much as we want to and as we'd love to, we can't take those things and make those work. Talk about, okay, transitioning a little bit. I'll hop off the soapbox. I got excited there for a second. Talk about finding the right content and matching that up to the right skills for the same reason as it is like matching a person to a job or matching a person to a task. Those same kind of problems that exist. Can AI solve for applying the content piece and helping people to find the right things that they need?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. So to get excited with you on that last point, because I think it feeds nicely into this one as well, is the thing that I was surprised the most with all the potential that this platform has, what we have underneath the hood, how we're talking about skills as a universal language, et cetera, is that organizations are using it for that exact point, to keep people within the organization, keep valuable skills by charting a pathway that makes sense. And I think so much of the ink spilled on this topic is, where are the new exciting places? Where are the new innovations? What is a company going to have to hire for new growth for? But really, it's still the foundations that this thing helps to shore up. And then in addition, yeah, that's a nice perk as well. So I think content especially is key to that. And we realized that, I think, ourselves a few years ago when we launched our content business, because in order to achieve what I referenced earlier of this new system of work that helps organizations to become future ready, it has to help meet the personalization aspect. And I think that we've falsely conflated options with personalization. And that's where I think problems fall down, is that you, Ben, have very different skills than I have. But when we both go to a system of learning, we both deserve content for the unique skills you have and the unique skills I have. And that requires the ability not only to see what's happening in someone's current role, but also what are the skills that somebody brings from their past that I don't need to work anymore on, I don't know, comms. You get the idea. And I need to focus more on something else. And it only comes from that really true broad perspective. So we have deployed this content strategy, and our latest iteration of it is to bring in content from the web. So we have an artificial intelligence that actually goes out and looks for content aligned to skills and subjects, automatically tags them, and then humans take the best stuff that the AI finds and helps to pull it into the pipeline to teach skills, especially the ones that are on the cusp that would be really difficult for an instructional designer to build really actionable, up-to-date content as the world of tech is rapidly changing. Like when you talked with your manuscript, you publish, and then suddenly the next day something amazing happens. The same as with learning content. But we can help leverage the power of the web aligned to that language of skills to move people forward.
Yes. Like fast growing companies, high tech companies, like those kinds of things, you're not going to find a college course on that, right? Or 10 pieces of quality learning content. It's someone sharing those things because they're learning it as they go. And so that becomes the de facto resource for some of those kinds of things. I wrote down what you said, though, like we falsely conflated options with personalization, because I think that's a great point and a great thing to remind the audience out there that just offering 10,000 choices, that's not bad inherently. But just saying, okay, here's the keys, good luck, that's challenging for learners to, okay, now where do I go? What do I do? And so giving them a little more of a tailored path to say, hey, because of what you want to be, because of what you want to do, because of what you already do, like those sorts of signals fit into how the algorithm might recommend those things to them. And that's such an exciting place to be. Goodness gracious, I'm enjoying this so much. There's one other thing I was going to say. Hat tip to Henry for the Sisyphus reference, right? Some mythology weaving into the conversation here. But that was a great reminder for me that so much of what we do in and around this can feel like we're churning, and the result may not be what the business actually needs or what they're looking for. Or we bring them like, look at this great thing we made. And like, yeah, I wanted something else. And so that's hurts to do that, pour our time and effort and money and resources into that, as talent leaders, as learning leaders, as HR leaders, all those things. And so I'd love for us, one last question doesn't matter which one of you wants to answer, but I'd love to bring this back, because I talked about tackling business problems and making this relevant to the business. And I'd love for you to help kind of wrap us up with that before we find out how to connect with Cornerstone and everything else, because I think that's the link in this conversation that's missing. We've talked about all the stuff kind of inside our walls. And then there's going to come a time, though, when you say, okay, I'm ready to go take this to the business. How do they approach that? Is it, we can solve these problems that you have right now because we can identify those skills? Is it something else? One of y'all take that for me?
Yeah, I can talk about, I just think of an example of a successful customer I've worked with really closely. Big, large US healthcare business, 100K employees. And, the guide that we build internally, we kind of talk about it as a maturity model. It's like every company is going to have some of the same starting points, and then you'll see it start to go out into your specific needs. It all starts with that gathering a baseline of data. It's like you need to know what you're looking at, and we can help you with that, and AI generally can help you with that. And then you immediately up level to sort of, do you know what you need? And so you have what you have, and then it's, do you know what you need? And that next question is, what are the jobs? What's the job architecture? What's sort of the organizational strategy? And then how do you back into, using that data effectively? When you go to actually deploy the data, and then now we're talking about, what this company did. What they did is they deployed skills to their population. They got that baseline of data. Then they immediately created a custom career exploration experience with Cornerstone. And they said, here's a bunch of different job tracks, explore these, read up on them. They had to do some of that work to put it together. And then the AI helped them pick the critical skills per role. And then people could go in and look at that, explore. They could say, I want these things. I'm interested in these things. And it was all very employee centric, but it was ultimately a data collection strategy, because then they turned it around and said, department leaders and managers, here's all the stuff you need to figure out what to do with these people. And L&D department, here's how to plan your training and your budgets and your programs for next year. And so that, when you look at outcomes, what they had is a way more data informed, way more accurate way of deploying L&D resources, and ultimately kind of a cheat code for their managers in terms of coaching. Like, that's really, and I would say they're at a level of maturity that's not even as far as you can possibly go with skills, but it's definitely a huge win if a company can get to that point.
I love that story. That is tremendous. We'll have to circle back on that one offline just to learn more about it, because I'm so excited about companies that take that step. And for everybody else out there that's like, I'm going to wait and see if someone else can do it, or wait and see if this is all just, if it's hype, right? And the research we did this year showed that no, there are plenty of companies that are actually seeing success, that are moving down the path, that are getting results and positive outcomes from it. But it still feels like sometimes like, but I want to hear about somebody else. I want to hear a real story. So thank you for sharing that, Henry. I'm going to ask you guys, one of y'all, to let me know how people can connect with Cornerstone. But before you do, everybody else out there listening in, if you're on LinkedIn right now, if you are listening to this on LinkedIn on the replay, you can click into the show notes there right next to the video, and you can link right over to Ike, or link to Henry's profile, connect with them. You can link over to Cornerstone. You can follow the company page there. But if someone wants to connect in another way, in addition to those, because they don't live their life on LinkedIn like I do, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, excellent. Just like you said, whatever your state is, whatever maturity you're in, please reach out to us. We can help you regardless of how advanced or not you think you are. And one of the great places to start is our innovation lab, AI innovation lab for Cornerstone, to look at our research ethics methodology on how we're thinking about all of this. And then finally, in the next couple of months, especially, you'll see more and more, but everywhere that we have tech real estate at Cornerstone, there's going to be skills associated. So whatever your need is, whatever you're thinking about, it's hard not to have a skills conversation with us. So just come knock on the door and we'll look at your organization, think about how to help you there. So go to cornerstone.com/demo and we can have a great conversation about skills.
Okay. Tremendous. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Great stuff. Thank you to both of you guys for joining us today, for sharing some insights. You did do a good job for the Ike and Henry show. So I appreciate both of y'all for hanging out with us and sharing.
Thanks, I'm glad we lived up to the hype.
All right. Thank you both. Have a good one, guys. All right. To everybody else out there, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope you enjoyed learning more about AI and how those things are working and how employers are using these tools to solve some of their problems. As I kind of alluded to at the very beginning, I kind of hinted at this, that the hiring market today is unlike anything that I've ever seen in all those years that I've been working in and around HR. And so that's changing. The way we need to train people and help educate them is changing. Our research shows that 2 out of every 3 employees, so picture 3 of your employees right now, 2 out of every 3 employees don't just say, I want to learn, I want to grow and develop. It's, I have quit a job because of a lack of development. But interestingly enough, 90% of those people would have stayed if they had had those opportunities. So lots of opportunity there for us to solve those problems, not just for those people and support them, but also for the business. Thank you all for joining us on HR Tech Talks. I appreciate you and hope you have a great rest of your week. It's going to be a fun one here. We're headed off to the HR Tech Conference to spend some time in Vegas with a bunch of the other leaders in the space, and looking forward to catching you here again next week for another edition of HR Tech Talks.